Hi everybody. Welcome to Class on Your Own today. Today we're talking about world systems theory. This is a sort of a continuation and a modernization of what we talked about on Wednesday, which was the Marxist international relations theory. Now, obviously, Lenin's been gone for a while, so we have the basics of that from Wednesday. World systems theory really sort of takes it up to the modern world, and more how Marxists, and not just Marxists in general, but a lot of people are really skeptical of the capitalist system. This is how they tend to think about how the international system actually works. What's important here is you don't have to buy the whole theory that of Marx and Lenin that the whole capitalist system has to come down. But it does sort of say there's something wrong with the system we have right now, and that's what's driving things. In fact, one of the ways to think about this is if the realists are all about power, the Marxists don't necessarily disagree with that idea. It's about power. They would just say power is really in the hands of those who have the money. So it's not about states having a lot of power. It's about individual capitalists who have lots of money who use the state and its military power for their own ends. That's sort of what we're talking about here. So let's talk about this theory. I think it's a really interesting theory. And before you just go saying, that's crazy stuff, that's crazy talk, it's all conspiracy theory and crap like that, give it some thought, just think about what's going on there. And there's really two questions whenever we have something like this. One, is the theory adequately critiquing what's going on? Two, does it make recommendations that are good recommendations? You can believe the theory is good, but not like the recommendations that come out of it. So we'll talk about that. Here we go. So Immanuel Wallerstein, this is the guy you guys read for today. He's wrote a whole lot of things. I know it's confusing. I didn't mind throwing a pretty difficult article at you guys, just because you guys are in college, you guys are ready for this kind of stuff. So let's start here. What is capitalism? We've talked about what capitalism is already in here, but let's just talk about how he phrases this. Capitalism is prices and production determined through competition in a free market. My guess is that's something you probably won't disagree with no matter where you stand on capitalism. This is what capitalism is. I come to the marketplace, I want things, and I'm willing to pay money. A producer comes to the marketplace, they want to sell things, and they want my money, and we, through supply and demand in a free market, prices are determined, what gets produced is determined, and that's how it sort of works. And if somebody can come in and make this thing cheaper, I'll probably buy that instead. And so it's the competition in the free market. Fantastic. The goal, then, of capitalism is the endless accumulation of capital. Now, this gets a little tricky. First of all, let's make sure we know what capital is. Capital is just like money and the stuff you can use to make stuff. So just for simplicity's sake, we'll just call capital money. And then maybe things like factories and things that you can use to make stuff. All right, endless accumulation of capital. Like, why does a business exist? A business doesn't exist to give 10% back to the community. The only reason Target will ever give 10% back to the community is because it thinks more people will come in and buy stuff. Target doesn't exist to help the community. Target exists for one reason and one reason only, and that is profit, which is getting more money, spending money to get more money back. The endless accumulation of capital is the whole thing. That's what it's all about. Company's main motive is profit. If a company ever tells you their main motive is something other than profit, they're either A, not a real company, or B, they won't be in business very long. Love or hate capitalism, love or hate businesses, business exists for profit. Everything else is a means for getting profit. This isn't just Wallerstein, by the way. Right now I'm just telling you what capitalism is. So you're going to take that profit, that capital, and you're going to invest it to make more profit and capital. That's what you're going to do with it. So, for example, should I lobby the government for better taxes if I'm a business? The answer is, if I think that I can spend $100,000 on a lobbyist who will go to Washington and get taxes lowered and save me $200,000, of course I'm going to invest that money. I'll invest it in research and development. I'll invest it in lobbying. I'll invest it in anything as long as I believe that money will come back to me in more profit. And then I'll take that profit and I'll do it again. At no point will a company say, we finally have enough money, we're done. No, it's the endless accumulation of capital. All right, now we're going to get to Wallerstein here for a second. And I just want you to think about this for a second. The whole thing about this is it happens in a free market, meaning the government doesn't get involved. It's just competition. If Pepsi makes a better product than Coke, then more people will drink Pepsi. And Coke just says, good, that just will work harder and earn your business. That's not how capitalism works. That's not how businesses work. Capitalists don't really want free markets. Why not? What they want is monopolies. So think about this for a second here. You can say all the sort of abstract great things about capitalism you want, but if you own a business, you'd like to be the only company in that business because then the customers have to come to you. And if they have to come to you, you get to set the prices. In a monopoly, the producer determines the price. So while this is great in theory, any individual business or owner of business will prefer no free markets. They'll want that monopoly. Because if they have the monopoly, they'll get higher profits, and that's what it's all about. It's not about this sort of abstract, we love competition. It's about making money. Okay. So far, so good. Now, what we know is that monopolies are hard to come by in real competition. So what a company will often do is it will find ways to create monopolies if it can. And that's going to lead us to this phrase called a quasi-monopoly. A quasi-monopoly, sorry, I just crossed it out. A quasi-monopoly is not really a monopoly, but it acts and looks like a monopoly. Are you with me on this so far? Since businesses want monopolies, and monopolies are hard to get, they'll take the next best thing, and that's a quasi-monopoly. Let's talk about what a quasi-monopoly actually looks like. This is where the state intervenes to create monopoly-like conditions for its businesses. So the United States government will act in such a way to protect U.S. business interests around the world. And we wouldn't say that's quasi-monopoly. We would just say that's good business. That's just smart dealings. But it's not free market capitalism. It is the U.S. government getting involved. It's not free market. It's the U.S. government getting involved. It's the French government getting involved on behalf of French companies. The Chinese government getting involved on behalf of Chinese companies. Or more precisely, Chinese capitalists, French capitalists, U.S. capitalists. So that's what it all is. So then you say, okay, well, how does that do? I mean, when does the government ever do that? So I'll give you some examples. Tariffs and protectionist measures, where the government says, okay, we're going to put tariffs on this thing coming in from out of the country. So let's say all steel coming into the United States, you have to pay, $10,000 for each unit of steel that comes in as a tariff. And that makes the steel coming in from this country over here, let's say Germany, more expensive. So if I'm in America and I need steel, I'm more likely to buy U.S. steel because it's going to be cheaper because of the tariff. So here's U.S. steel, and let's say it's 20. And here's German steel, and let's say it's 15. But then we add a tariff of 10, and all of a sudden it equals 25. And now U.S. producers choose U.S. steel. And that's sort of how that works. So again, it's not a monopoly, but the government is stepping in to create conditions that creates something closer to a monopoly. Another example would be, and there's other protectionist measures, which we won't go into now, but things like this that will add extra costs to it. State subsidies. This is the reverse of tariffs. This is where the state, let's take back our example here. I probably should have done that better. But here's 20, here's 25. Oh, I did that wrong. 15, I mean. Okay, there we go. So again, German steel is cheaper. I'm a U.S. business. I'm going to buy German steel because it's only 15 versus the U.S., which is 20. So the government might come in and say, okay, we're going to give the U.S. steel manufacturers a subsidy of 10. So they get 10 for everything they produce, so that means their cost is now only 10, and now all of a sudden U.S. steel is cheaper. We do this with cotton, we do this with corn, a lot of food things, so that when it comes to food, there's this sort of push to buy American because farmers have a lot of political power. These are state subsidies. You don't need to know the math on this right now. For the most part right now, just know the government stepping in, and once the government does that, it's no longer a free market. And it does it on behalf of U.S. producers, suppliers. Patents and intellectual property rights. Now, there's good reasons for intellectual property rights and patents. At the same time, though, when the government steps in, the government says, okay, we're going to protect what you just made for 10, 20 years, whatever the property rights are. And that means nobody else can make these things. So if India goes ahead and an Indian company tries to make this particular thing using that same thing, the same sort of patent or whatever, then the U.S. government's going to get involved and use its power, its legal power, its economic power, sometimes even its military power, to force the Indian company to stop. Again, there's probably good reasons for that, but what this is not is a free market. This is the government getting involved to create quasi-monopolies, is to sort of say, you can't be involved, you can't compete in this free marketplace. The government buys American, or the French government buys French. Again, there's great nationalism reasons for this, but from a capitalism perspective, it doesn't make a lot of sense. This is where the government doesn't go out and say, I'm going to buy the cheapest thing, because that's what a free market would call for. It says the government goes out, I'm going to buy American goods. And that creates a monopoly for American producers. Heavy regulation. The more regulation that you put on products, whatever that, and regulation comes from the government, the more regulation that gets put on things, it makes it more expensive for smaller producers. So particularly in countries where they have the larger producers of a particular thing, heavy regulation will often drive out the competition. Again, it's not the company that's pushing them out, it's the government on behalf of the companies, and that's what this thing where we're talking about right here. Unbalanced trade agreements, where the government negotiates a trade agreement with another state on behalf of the producers in that country. So if the U.S. has a lot more power than, say, Costa Rica, the U.S. is going to get a much better trade agreement than Costa Rica, and it's going to structure it in a way it's going to help U.S. businesses, not Costa Rican businesses. And so these agreements will also tilt the balance. And then coercion and threat thereof is that essentially the state can use the threat of force or economic sanctions or whatever that is and say, on behalf of its own producers, the stronger the country, the better the deal that you would expect them to get. What all this means, all these things here require strong states. You got to have strong states to do that above stuff. And this is kind of going back to what we were just saying about this idea that the realist says it's all about power, and the Marxist or the world systems and theory person from Wallerstein here, they don't disagree. They just say when you're talking about power, one of the big things about power is economics. All right, great. So here we have this situation where essentially capitalism is a thing that says it's one thing, but the capitalists themselves want something else, these quasi-monopolies. So what's going to happen is these quasi-monopolies, they're not going to be in every area of the economy. That's a lot going on there. What they're going to do is they're going to concentrate on what we call leading products, meaning sort of the new thing. Whatever the new thing is, because that's where the money is. In the first years of personal computers, they were really expensive. Now personal computers are relatively cheap. In the early days, that's what we call leading products. I'll let you think about what leading products are now. Usually it's anything Apple makes is kind of the way that goes. But let's just talk about this, and then I have one more slide, and then we're going to take a break. Quasi-monopolies don't last forever. These are temporary things. They tend to be in areas that are, again, leading, and then as things happen, then essentially it becomes less productive to keep the quasi-monopoly in place, and the capitalists in your country move on to the next leading product. So secrets leak, competition grows, profits drop. Let me give you the best example I can. That's medicine. So let's say that we spend, 10 years coming up with this new medicine for heart disease. Everybody wants medicines for heart disease. So what will happen is it's a leading product. Now that we've made this medicine for heart disease, then the government's going to step in and create all these barriers that will allow their companies to have this quasi-monopoly. So for example, they'll put patents out or intellectual property rights. So say for the next 20 years, nobody else can make this particular thing. They'll put tariffs on things. They'll do all sorts of things to sort of make sure that that's protected. But over time, the secrets are going to leak out. People are going to find out how to make this thing. There's going to be competition from other countries, other capitalists, and the profits will begin to drop. And then what's going to happen is the capitalists are going to shift their capital to new leading industries. Because this is another interesting thing. So far I've been talking about businesses, and you're thinking in your head, okay, Coca-Cola or Target or something like that. And that's not how capitalism works. Yes, there's businesses and all that kind of stuff. But where the money is the money is invested in businesses. And I can, if I've invested in, say, I don't know, Target, I can, quote unquote, call my broker or just get on Robinhood, and I can, like that, in just a second, take my money out of Target and put it into the next thing. And that's true for me. That's true for all capitalists out there, everybody who's got money. So what's going to happen is, if I've got money, I'm going to put that money into the thing that's going to get me the most profit. That's going to be these leading industries. And especially that's true because the government's going to support these quasi-monopolies, which will keep these things profitable for a while. And as they become less profitable, then I'm going to take my money out of that. I'm going to invest it in the next thing. So that's another really important point about capitalism. It's not just about businesses out there doing this kind of stuff, though businesses are going to sort of push that. It's also about capitalists themselves, is that they have their own money and they will invest it in the place that's most profitable. And they will encourage the government to protect those profitable places to invest things. So capitalists are going to shift their capital to new leading industry. Quasi-monopolies last about 20 to 30 years, and I think that time is decreasing as time is going on. But it's plenty of time to make lots of money, take my money out and put it in the next big thing, make more money, take my money out, put it in the next big thing, make more money. Now, what that leads us to is this right here, as we start to think about how that is at an international level. And I'm going to have another video coming on after this. Just because it's not on this PowerPoint, it's just going to be easier for me to explain it on this next video, talking about the core, semi-periphery, and periphery. And then we'll do that, then we'll come back and we will try to see if this is actually a valid thing.